take Second Life really seriously. But again, it was mostly a leisure time activity. For some people, it became kind of dangerously more than a leisure time activity. But I really don't think there has been enough attention paid to, at least among sociologists. Journalists are talking a lot about this. I think I mentioned to you guys a book that came out this year, last year, called "It Came from Something Awful." Written by a bless you, written by written by a journalist, about how kind of, the earlier days of Web 2.0, of social media-ing. There was this site called Something Awful that had a web forum, for I hope you guys, or maybe you are, I guess, I don't know. If you're familiar with, the awful side of the internet, so gore sites and that kind of thing. That's what Something Awful was largely about. Or I'm trying to think now. How old are you? You remember? I fortunately never clicked on it. But Two Girls, One Cup, that kind of shit. Okay, yes, all right. Yeah. So how that how that evolved into 4chan and some other sites that really kind of advocated for things like incel culture, for extreme hate and those kinds of really problematic uses, but at the same time, that is community, and that's kind of where I think we need more research to be focusing. So today's article on cyber hate. It's a little weird, and I guess Joelle's going to walk us through it in a moment here. But it's a little funny, in as much as it's written by criminologists, and they talk a kind of a funny language, and even how they conceptualize. Well, again, Joel will get us through this, I'm sure, but this idea that seeing hate speech or hateful content online is conceived as a victimization of the viewer, which even they admit, for a lot of viewers, that doesn't really make sense. But this is, it gets us a little closer. It answers some questions about who these people are who are using it, but it's maybe not ultimately the most fruitful way for us to think about these kinds of online communities. But again, it is, I think it's an important step, and unfortunately, I'm waiting for the really kind of the great sociological rendering of the 2016 election, and the communities that kind of what these guys are calling the filter bubbles that come up, and how that problematizes or just changes the way that people communicate. So with that preamble being said, I'm gonna turn it over to, oops, I'm presenting, I'll stop presenting, and I'll turn it over to Joel. You're off. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Window. All right. So, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't see it for some reason. Anyway, just fair warning, this presentation was a lot harder than I thought it would be, and actually, it took me way longer to look for a meme than to do the actual presentation, and I couldn't find a single meme that I understood. So there's that. And then there's this warning here also that I have absolutely no understanding of the alt-right, and I really tried to research them so I could have more information about it, but I just don't get it. They're wild. I guess that in itself is something that they're just ununderstandable people. Okay, anyway, so this article was authored by James Hawdon and et al., but I wanted to put their names there because they worked hard on it too, so they should have their recognition. Um, so this article basically was about how people use the internet, political attitudes, and then how people use the internet to be exposed to extremist violence and the content that advocates for violence. So, oh, actually, this again. So basically, the alt right is just an entire community for people that like to trigger others and like just troll on the internet. So when I was looking, this first picture right here, the alt right's like symbol is it says Kek, and so Kek is from an online game. It says KEK horizontally and vertically, and so I used to play this game. It's called World of Warcraft, and so there's two different parties in World of Warcraft, and they don't speak each other's language. So in one group, if you say LOL in the other language, it looks like it's saying Kek. So basically, their entire symbol means LOL. So obviously, that points to them trolling people. Anyway, okay, so the virtual extremist content that they're talking about in this article, they say is the worst type of hate because it has the potential to radicalize and move from just the ideology and the rhetoric to people actually moving forward with it and turning into action. And so the type of virtual extremism they're talking about is like hate group socialization. So becoming part of these groups virtually, whether that be like a Facebook group or like 4chan chat rooms or whatever they use. Um, and then becoming part of this group and Googling these things, marketing has turned into this program where they do personalized advertisements. So we'll get a little bit more into that earlier, but essentially the advertisements trap you into this extremist content. So once you're in, it's kind of forced at you. And then once you're part of this group, the content obviously is pushed at you more, and then you're invited to engage in violent behaviors. And then because obviously this is virtual, it can go anywhere. So it can, even if there's a group in, you know, Indiana, but you're in California, you can find that information. So it's easier to find your community online since people don't have to go through like that vetting opportunity. Like you can't walk around to your neighborhoods. It's like, hey, do you hate Black people? No, cool. But you can ask people online because there aren't really that many repercussions. So these are some research questions that they were trying to answer in the article, and I just wanted to go over these quickly. I'm going to answer them in the presentation, but just some things to think about. The research question number 1 is, do particular online behaviors increase the likelihood of exposure to online hate material? So does how you're using the internet and how you're behaving online increase your likelihood to exposure? 2, do various online or offline associations increase the likelihood of exposure to online hate material? So do the people you associate with increase your likely to have violence on your feed or whatever? And then 3, do political, social, or economic discontent increase the likelihood of exposure? So if you're discontent with the things, with how things are in America or really anything you're not happy with, does that increase your exposure? So these are the correlations they found. I wanted to actually spend some time and go through them because they kind of map out the specific person and behaviors that lead to exposure. So obviously using social media more increased the likelihood but only slightly. So it doesn't really matter how much you used it, but it was more important on the behaviors that you were using the internet with. Like old people, if they're on the internet all the time, but they're Googling, I don't know, cooking recipes, it doesn't matter that they're using the internet the same amount. It's just how they're using it. And then so individuals who have been the target of hate are almost 2.5 times more likely to be exposed, not necessarily to be in those groups, but obviously if those groups are targeting the individual, then they're more likely to see it. And then people who openly express their political views online are significantly more likely to be exposed, whether that be people who have the same view as them, inviting them into these groups, or sharing content with them, or people who oppose their own political views, attacking them, because specifically the alt-right, they like to troll people. So if you have different views from them, you're more likely to see those. And then those, I didn't really see how this correlated, but I mean, I guess those who lack self-control are more likely to see hate material. We can talk about that a little later, but I couldn't really think of a reason why self-control made it more likely. I don't know if that's like, I don't know, because for sometimes you like get on YouTube at really late at night and then you just keep clicking the next video, and you don't go to sleep. And I was thinking like that was like self-control, like you can't stop yourself from clicking on something. And then they also found that, did you want to say something? No? Okay.
Yeah, but just that the all this stuff. Remember that they're coming from that criminological
Yeah.
perspective, right? So people. So we're thinking of the exposure to hate speech as a victimization. So
Mhm.
people who lack self-control, it's a little bit of the blame the victim perspective out of criminology. It's like if you lack, it's like, you know, if you get drunk at a bar, and you lack the self-control not to get drunk, you're more likely to get mugged. Like it's really with literature on any kind of victimization. So I think that's where that's coming. Sorry.
Okay. And then they also found that, well, like you said earlier, the online behaviors and specific online behaviors increase the likelihood of exposure to hate advocating materials. So like if you were specifically using Facebook to find memes or to talk with people or use gaming services and things like that, then you're more likely to um, have exposure. And then this one is what I thought was interesting and kind of correlated with the second correlation. It says that minority status, gender, age, and education level are not significantly related to exposure, which I thought kind of went against the individuals who've been targeted by hate are more likely to be exposed to violent materials, because usually these extremist groups are against one of the other, gender or minority status, something like that. So you would think that people in those groups would be more likely to be exposed, just because the extremist groups are against them as human beings. And then another said um, that online and offline associations do not consider an influence chance of being exposed, which I also thought was interesting, because you would think that the people that you associate with, it kind of goes against everything else that they're saying. The people that you associate with are the people that introduce you to these things, or like the pages you follow. Um, so I don't understand how they got that and all the other correlations. And then also, individuals who are satisfied with major institutions are less likely to be exposed to violence. That makes sense, obviously, because people who are dissatisfied are the ones that share their opinion and share their political views. Because obviously, if you are okay with everything, and you're kind of like a conformist, then you won't share those views, and no one will know what your views are to argue against them. Um, and then trust in politicians is not significantly related to exposure. And then uh, also sharing a worldview critical of the dominant system, kind of the opposite of the other one, increases your likelihood of being exposed, because you're sharing your political opinions and you're Googling things that are of the interest of some of these extremist groups. So you fall into those worlds, and then they're like one of their major findings was that greater satisfaction with major institutions and involvement in the dominant culture and the dominant economic system um, is like a protective factor against violence advocating materials. So if you are, okay with everything and you're not Googling all this random stuff about women or Black people or, the normal extremist things, then you won't have those materials forced on you. And then so the internet specifically facilitates this exposure really well, and it happens to like be the best cross point of technology to get this content across, because the internet facilitates an open transmission of ideas. So anything can come from anywhere. You can put anything online, and it doesn't really have much consequence. Sometimes it has consequences for extremist groups, like, for example, when they were rioting with the tiki torches or whatever, a lot of those people lost their jobs because people sent pictures of them. But again, that was in person. That was when they came out and showed their face. But online, there isn't really any bad things that can happen to you if you just say whatever you want. And then there's unfiltered exchange. So, your words aren't filtered. You can, again, really say anything you want. And then youth, who are the people mostly using technology and exploring technology, not just using it, but because they're, tech savvy, they're going on to do more things and finding more stuff than people that are older. So the youth are really susceptible, especially because young people are impressionable and curious. And like, for example, a kid could be mad at his mom one day and thinks he hates women and types something into Google and then sees something, and now he's on this spiral that wouldn't have necessarily happened just because his mom grounded him. And then more into these personalized ads, which I'm really into marketing, so I thought this was interesting to me, is that things like Facebook, specifically, Facebook has a page. I haven't done it in a long time and I don't really remember how to do it, but Facebook takes like what you're Googling, what you're searching on Facebook, the things you share, the things you post, and they make like a grid of what they think you are. So they'll think like you're liberal, they'll think you're a minority, a woman within this age group, and then they'll send you ads specifically that they think you'll like. So once these people enter this kind of extremist virtual group, then they're kind of stuck in it because they get ads personalized to them that keep them in this homogenous echo chamber, as they call it. So like you're in this bubble and it's just swirling around with material that you already think of and you already know. And so you don't get any diversity of thought. So you're kind of trapped in this this echo chamber, which leads to cognitive bias and misinformation, because you're not getting any other information than the information that you believe to be true and other people are telling you that's true. So that's how the internet facilitates this really well. And then pathways to radicalization. This is the path that the author thinks people take to eventually become extremists. So first, they're exposed. People, happen upon this ideology that they think may be interesting, or that they're curious about it, or they already had a little bit of that view, and then they actually find it, and then they do what's called flocking. They have these same ideologies, and then they look for communities or groups with people who share the same ideologies. So they're looking for like that the community and organization, that group culture. And then what they do is feathering. And feathering is when they're already in that group and they're in that culture, and then they share their attitudes with those around them. So for example, like, I have this example here, but if a person is dissatisfied with the government and they search for a group to share their worries with or vent to, and things like that, and then this person initially joined the group because of their distaste in the government, but once they're engulfed in the group and they're friends with everybody in the group, If the group culture is that they also don't like minorities, then that person will begin to exhibit the ideologies of the group. So initially, they just had distaste for the government, but now once they're in the group, they also don't like whatever the group likes. And then my keynotes for this are that online behaviors correlate with exposure to extremist violent content. So really how you're acting online is a way to get exposed. And then an extremist group target impressionable people with so they target impressionable people, but the impressionable people are more likely to join the group if they have experienced hardship or they believe they've experienced hardship or disenfranchisement. And then marketing and personal ads cause homogenous bubbles that trap extremists into their ideals. And then also people seek hatred and hate content, or they like get involved in this hate content more than other people if the individual is like angry or depressed in their own life or something has happened. And so they try to join these groups as a way to shift their anger onto someone else. For example, like if someone lost their job because a Black person was more qualified, they they would blame the Black people for losing their job instead of just saying, oh, I could probably get better in my own right. So those are the people that are most vulnerable to become extremists. And then these are some discussion questions I had because I was thinking, so I have my independent study right now is doing race relations on campus. And so one of my survey answers, well, if you took the survey, we gave you a sticker that said Black Lives Matter. And one of my survey answers said, yes, of course I would like a sticker. I love terrorist organizations. And they were calling like Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization. So I was thinking, why, if people call social justice movements and organizations like terrorist and extremist groups like they do Black Lives Matter, what dictates that something is extreme? Like what makes something Black Lives Matter different from someone like the alt-right? Because technically Black Lives Matter has still done some violent things, which is, I mean, obviously, but they think that they're fighting for the right thing, but the other side also thinks they're fighting for the wrong thing. So
I think it's kind of like the people that are in charge and have like the ruling ideologies, which for us is old white men. And so they're like, when something goes against what they think is like, the norm and like what people should believe, they consider it a threat against like their whole livelihood. So they think it's like a terrorist or an extremist. But like when it's like the fine young men with tiki torches, because it's people that are like them and are like-minded, they're like, oh no, that's fine.
mm-hmm.
They're fine young men.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
I don't think anyone is saying that the alt-right and like what they were doing in, I think that was Ferguson, I don't know. I don't think anyone's saying that they're not terrorists, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm asking is if the alt-right and those people that were marching were terrorists and Black Lives Matter are also terrorists, are they both extremists? Even though like Black Lives Matter is, I guess, less terroristy in American media?
Maybe. I mean, it kind of depends on like their actions. I would say like they would speak louder than what they stand for, kind of thing. And this hypothetical theory, by the way.
Yeah, because like if you think about it, like what's the difference between someone that's a normal environmentalist versus like an eco-terrorist. Because like people get classified as eco-terrorists all the time, or not all the time, but like it's a matter of actions and like if the event is like I was just reading about this for my independent study this week, but it talked about it labeled it as like honey versus vinegar approaches to social movements. And so like the honey approach would be like trying to reach consensus and like doing things peacefully versus like the vinegar approach is more like doing direct actions to like make change. So I think that like it depends on the approach that they take in that respect.
Yeah. I don't know. I still don't know what or who dictates what's extreme. So I guess everyone has their own thoughts of that. Okay, and then my second discussion question is when I was researching this, I found an article from a mother who said that she like took her son is like 12, and she like took her son's phone and like found like Hitler memes and like all this stuff from like the alt-right, and she was wondering how she can get her son out of that because her family, and she tried to raise him very progressively, but she can't really compare with his friends online that formed his sense of humor. And so if he thinks that these memes are funny, and that's how kind of how his sense of humor formed, then how does she get him out of this, pathway to being an extremist or being a racist? So I was wondering if you guys think people like along the way can recognize their steps of extremism and remove themselves or others from that pathway.
I just wanted to say that I knew somebody in high school that was really into like the Hitler stuff. And I like in school, like we had computers, and they could tell like what he had on his computer, and they actually found out, and what they did to stop like the extremism was they suspended him and then put him on online school. So I guess that can kind of show like how show the person how the ideology of extremism is bad in that aspect, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's definitely really hard though, because like there was a kid from my high school too who he ended up going to Mass Maritime, and he was he wore a Nazi uniform. Just like he wore a Nazi uniform to classes one day, and the way that they dealt with that was they just expelled him. But like even that doesn't like change someone's ideology. In fact, it might just like piss them off and make them more inclined to like continue down that path. Because I know like with the whole like the white supremacist memes and like that whole thing that goes on, because they like attract middle school age kids who think it's funny, but then like when people call them out and are like that's not funny, it just makes them angry, and they're like, well, you just don't get my sense of humor, and then it just reiterates to them that like, well, I'm right and you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it just pushes them further down the path of extremism. So like I don't really know how to reorganize that and like fix that problem.
You make a good point, Sophia.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because like for example, the guy that got expelled, if he's already upset with the way the organization is and like how the system is, if the system is punishing him, then he would want to fight against the system even more. He would think that what he's doing is working because the system is angry, like that he's going against it. I don't know. Yeah. Because I feel like I mean, in my middle school as well, like, do you guys remember, maybe it was only mine, but like people were like super into dead baby jokes?
Yeah.
You guys high
Yeah.
school? And it was just so weird to me. And people really thought like Holocaust jokes were funny and like things like that. And people like really built their middle school personas and humors over stuff like this. Luckily, I don't think people from my high school are in the alt-right, but you know, stopping it early in these high school and middle school places could be a step because you got to start young. But that's something to think about. But yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you for that. Also, I think one of you mentioned at one point the former New College student who grew up as, I mean, as like really deep in the alt-right. Like his dad ran like some radio broadcast, and he was a pretty public figure in the alt-right. And he went to New College and got exposed. I mean, so if you're at New College, I mean, it's a really diverse student body and a bunch of hippies. And he's like, oh, like Black people are human beings. This is weird. Like, oh, like Jews don't have horns. Like, oh, wow. So this is, so educational programs like that are exposures to diversity. I think what you guys are saying about, if you send the kid, if you expel the kid from college, now he's got all the time in the world to spend more time online and you brought up this good point too, Joelle, about this idea that they kind of, and I think it's a kind of a broadly applicable theory of society or theory of interpersonal behavior, social psychology, that people who have things that are going wrong in their life always want to find somebody else to blame for that. And they put it in the broad array of disenfranchised white people, who have lost. I mean, and there's there's a lot of literature around this of how white people, lower class white people, have lost economic opportunities. And you can look to like Hochschild's work on this. They're out to blame all the minorities, or as with the Trump thing, especially immigrants. So it's immigrants and it's Black people who are collecting welfare. It's not my fault, it's not working class white people's fault. It's all those people's fault. And so I think you're right. If you take somebody who's already has radical proclivities and you kick them out of your institution, that just feeds into that narrative of okay, well, now I see it. It really is those people who run these institutions who are keeping me down, and that can just kind of further feed the hate. So I really, I don't know. I tend to agree with William Cronin's idea that only connection, right? The only way to make things better is to make connections with other people, and of course that's the ultimate problem of these online communities. Is that like you're saying, the way that there's so many acronyms in this paper, or initializations, right? SNS, they mean social networking sites, which I don't even know if that's the greatest terminology anymore, because it's Facebook is way more than a website. Twitter is way more than a website. Now, it's this whole platform. There are people for whom I have heard Facebook essentially is the internet. You know, and you know that if you use the Facebook app now, God, you know, you see, you know, I mean, I guess, yeah, older people, people who are not internet savvy, you know, will do web searches through Facebook, you know, so you see them accidentally posting that as their status online, that kind of thing. If you conflate that with being the whole internet, where was I going with this? Oh, right, and the algorithms have siloed you. You know, then you're never going to make those connections. There's no, and it's so insidious, right? So, Joel, you highlighted ads, and obviously that's a huge part of it. I don't know what I did. I might have mentioned this to you guys. Like, I don't know what I did or what I liked. I think it was after I went out of my way to follow Fox News on Instagram. You know, just to like be like, what the fuck does Fox News have to say? And it's, by the way, it's weird. Like it is, it's more balanced content than I expected. But the comment sections are a cesspool. Anyway, oh right, I think it was after following that I started to get all kinds of ads for churches, and I'm like a guy who, like, I only go to church for weddings and funerals, right? That was weird, right? But that's the algorithm still trying to learn like what I'm about or who I am or whatever. But right, so on that level, you get that. I think the even more insidious thing with, well, there's there. I mean, it piles up. A more insidious thing is how the algorithm directs your searches and your exploration of the internet, right? So if you look for, you know, I don't even know. Well, I mean, I guess we can do this here. What happens if so I'm sharing my Facebook with you now, which I don't know. We'll see how that goes. If I go on Facebook and I search for, well, let me go to, right, groups. Okay, you know, and just from that you see, like, you know, based on my interests, like sociologists and banjos and economists and old people things, right? There you go. But if I search for, can I search a group? Yes, I can discover. No, I can't. Oh, I can't search. That's good. That's good, right? So they really just want to steer me in a certain direction. And like you said, if I was already a Nazi, right, you'd probably find Nazi stuff in here, right? I guess this is my way to prove to you that I'm not another way to prove to you that I'm not a Nazi. But if I search for things, what do I want to search for? Like a political humor. There you go. If I search for political humor, what do I find? Oh, I do get some Republicans. That's good. All right. A lot of Barack Obama looking stuff. Yeah, but see, if you get these photos here, right? This is, you know, obviously I'm a left leaning person, right? And all the photos I see are going to be, right? Oh, Trump for prison. Yeah, great. Photo of Trump giving relief to the, you know, my uncle voted for Trump, right? So they know what what my leanings are, what I'll find funny or comfortable. Sorry, that one's really good. You know, but then consider, if I'm impressionable and I'm looking for friends, what if I click on one of the, these are all from the same site, political humor, political humor, political humor. Oh, maybe that's what I am. Okay, I'm stuck in the echo chamber already, right? Because these are all coming from the same site. And so if I joined political humor, right, and then would I find, like, then I can find pages liked by this page, right, and I'll get more crap like this, right? So you really, it's not just to kind of point out, it's not even just the ads, it's everything, right? It's the whole platform is organized, and it's here's the a problem with it, another problem with it. It's not just that it makes you happy or keeps you in your comfort zone or whatever. And they suggest, the authors of this piece, suggest that there is a certain positivity to that, and I get that, right? Because there is, I mean, the internet, as they say, well, sorry, old man stories. There used to not be a lot of stuff on the internet, like, So I remember, like, in 1997, 98, there were like, there really weren't social networking sites on the internet. You had to go to a separate sort of a bill. You weren't even born, right? You had to go to a separate platform software to find, like, discussion forums, and some of them were Nazis, right? There was already some of that echo chamber, but there just wasn't much stuff, right? So you could really, so Google wasn't bothering with, like, insane algorithms to try to, like, steer you in a certain direction, because like everything that was on the internet was either like science nerd whatever stuff, pornography, or Jesus. And you could find whatever version of pornography or Jesus or science that you wanted to, and it wasn't really hard. Now there is just such, I mean, an insane amount of material, essentially everything that has been thought at this point has been scanned and put on the internet. There's such an insane amount of material that there needs to be some kind of algorithm, filtering out the stuff that you don't want. And that's obviously that's positive, that's necessary in a sense. What they're not mentioning, though, too, that I think is important, is that there's a profit motive underlying all of this, right? So Facebook exists. Blah blah. Wait, hold on. Facebook exists to make, where are the ads? Where are the ads? I'm getting ads right now. That's nice. Facebook exists to make money. Oh, I can shop though, right? So this site, oh, even that's why I'm not seeing ads, because political humor wants to sell me stuff, right? And because Amazon has now steered me towards political humor, I can, right, get a, what? I can get a Donald Trump toilet paper and toilet brush. Wow. All right. So again, the profit motive underlies all of this. They make money, right? And yeah, and if I'm in my timeline, yes, but I'm not going to show you my timeline because I don't want you to know what my weird uncles are saying today. This is ultimately, I think, the problem with all this, or a big problem with all this, is that Facebook doesn't have much of an incentive to stop doing the algorithms in the way that they do them because they want to make this money. They want to keep people as comfortable, as happy. And I'm sure. I'm not scientifically sure, but I'm fairly secure in the idea that Facebook doesn't really mind creating some Nazis along the way because the way that they've worked out the algorithms, the way that they're showing people stuff and getting them into these echo chambers makes it so that they get the most clicks on advertising so that they make the most money. And this, then this kind of becomes a political kind of question of what are the things that we can do as a society, as a polity, to change that, right? And honestly, there are laws in place. We could use things like the Sherman Antitrust Act to undermine Facebook, to either undermine their monopoly on this stuff, right? So Facebook and Twitter, same company, sharing algorithms, sharing data about people, right? That we could break them up. If we voted for people who wanted to use the antitrust legislation that we have, we could break them up. But that's I guess a different question for a different day. Just a couple other points I wanted to go over. Just with the correlations, you point out something that's really important with this, so that we're not seeing something like minority status as a significant correlate of exposure to hate material. And that's really, let me kind of whiteboard this for a minute, unless I lost my whiteboard pen, which I seem to have done. That's cool. Oh, I have to go under my desk and retrieve my whiteboard pen. I'll be right back. Okay. Yes, I'm back. So what I think is the problem here, and this is just kind of speculation. Is that we're looking at, clearly multiple kinds of groups in the same, well, being exposed to, and really not necessarily the same kind of content. And so I guess I'll just, Venn diagram this. The dependent here is victims of hate exposure. And that hate exposure is a fairly broad measure in their survey. So it's something like, have you seen something online that disparages like an entire a group of people based on their race or ethnicity, or I think even political party. So it can really be both sides. And I should have made a bigger Venn diagram here. So there's going to be people on the left, and there's going to be people on the right. And then there's gonna be a group of people who, whoops, I don't know what that was. All right. There's gonna be a group of people who are the far right or the alt-right. And the problem, and I think they're pretty aware of this and pretty upfront about this. This is who we're really interested in. But their survey does not really allow us to tease this apart. And so when we see, I think they're probably right, that when we see that a variable like dissatisfaction, we're probably finding these folks, but at the same time, we're probably finding these folks here too. So the far left or the further left, would include things like you said, like BLM, right? BLM. If you ask me, if I'm an advocate for Black Lives Matter, or if I I don't know, subscribe to the newsletter, if I proudly wear the button or the sticker, they are not satisfied with the institutions of society, right? And the exposure that they may be finding or experiencing, might be things like, fuck the police. That is essentially speech that is hateful towards an entire group of people. So I think it's a little problematic overall for them to say like, we've really dialed in on the far right. I mean, what they've dialed into is people who are, I think, everywhere potentially, on the on the internet, and seeing people hating each other. That's just this kind of unfortunate reality of life on the internet. You spend enough time there, and you espouse certain hardcore views, you're gonna get people who hate people on either side of the aisle. And then I'm not sure how much I want to go into. I mean, I think it's worth thinking about this triple SL thing that they talk about. So SSSL is right, social structure, social learning model, and what this suggests is that, and it's honestly, this is really just mostly old school symbolic interaction, good meat and potatoes sociology of culture kind of stuff, that differential association, which means associating with certain groups of people, leads to different kinds of learning. And again, in the abstract, when we talk about like real life white supremacists, a lot of what that comes from is people whose parents are ignorant. If you are raised by a white supremacist, you are much more likely to be a white supremacist. And again, what they then though do is to take that differential learning, put it into the 21st century, and I really like their term for this, which I guess is not their term, but they're borrowing this term, these filter bubbles. And what that, gosh, I'm not quite sure how to, there is a visual representation for this, but I'm kind of having a hard time quite seeing it. But basically, the series, what we're thinking of here in terms of filters, is that there's a sort of a series of filters, or even, I guess, maybe switchmen or something like that, is a better metaphor. But here, and I'm sorry, I'll do this real quick. So politics goes through the filter. It's going to put you to the right or to the left. And then you're going to go through another filter to the far right and not so far. And, eventually, then you end up in this bubble of people who just think the same way that you do. And what is more, and I just one last thing to highlight is that feels good, right? So you mentioned, you can see in Joelle's slides, that these people validate each other, validate themselves. And so if you get a bunch of people who are thinking the same way, you're like, yeah, that's it, right? Oh, 9/11 was an inside job, and we should inject ourselves with Lysol. Okay, sorry. All right, so we're at full time for. I know y'all got things to do and places to be. We'll be moving along with the next chapter right on Monday. Right, so we'll talk about culture and power, and we'll spend the last couple of weeks on that material. Stay inside, everybody. Okay, stay sane, stay safe. I will see you soon, and I'll talk to you, Mary, now, I guess.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Let me just stop recording. Okay.